May is over and June is here. We are in summer and I've got 13 books to talk to you about because that's how many books I went through in the month of May. But I had several 5-star reads, which was so exciting, and just lots of good vibes. We'll start off with the first book I read in the month of May, which is Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. And I gave this 3 stars. I think it was not my favorite that I read by her, which I just did like a Carly Fortune binge, and like it's not that any of them were bad. This was just like probably my least favorite. So in this book we have the story of a girl who grew up on a resort, and she it's like a lake resort in Canada, and she goes to school in the city and doesn't want to animals. Are you gonna do animals? All right, you should do them right there. Yeah, good job. So she goes to school in the city and studies, I think, like business management or something like that, and gets a job working for a coffee shop. And she loves life in the city, but her mom, who's a single mom, has always wanted her to come back and help at the resort. And so post grad, she is pretty much obligated to go do that. And she is counting down the days in a not wanting to go, in a dreading way. And she encounters a man named Will, who is about the same age if I recall, and he's an artist, so he's doing a mural at the coffee shop she works at, and they end up spending the whole day together and just having a really deep connection. Even though neither of them are single, they don't cross any lines, but it's you can tell they both definitely are connected to this person more than just a surface level we just met type of thing. So they make plans to meet, I think, a year later at the lake resort because he heard all about it and he wanted to see it, and she needed something to look forward to about being there. So the year goes by and he doesn't show up, and she spends the rest of her adult life back in the city building coffee shops. She left the resort and decided that wasn't the life for her. He wasn't coming, there wasn't anything there for her. Anyways, her mom passes away and she's called back to run the resort. She was left with the resort in her possession, and she's freaking out. But there's a surprise because her mom also planned a meeting with Will. So she's grieving her mom, trying to figure out what she's gonna do now that she's in charge of this resort she never wanted to be in charge of. And this man who was part of her life, 20 years ago? Hold up, let me... Oh, 9 years ago. He was a part of her life 9 years ago for one day. He stood her up, and now he's back. And he's supposed to help her figure out how to do something she doesn't even want to do. So you watch them just figure out what's in the best interest of the resort and themselves, and just kind of come to terms with things that were once and maybe could be again. It was interesting, but I just think the way that he handled certain things was a little too much for me, and I think she was maybe a little too forgiving for my personal preference. Yeah, but maybe not. That's why you gotta read. That's all I gotta say. The second book I read, I didn't actually read most of it in May. I think I probably only read half of it, but I finished it in May after a little hiatus, was The Wedding People by Alison Espach. Yep, I'm going to say that's how you pronounce it. This book I have heard a lot about, not the actual story, but just about the book in general. And so I didn't know really what to expect going in, except for that people loved it and gave it high praise. So I started it out and found out this is kind of a depressing story. And at the time I was where I started, I was not looking for that. And so I let my Libby lend expire, and then I put it back on hold so that I could come back to it later. And when I did, I finished it. Like I said, I think it was about 50% that I read in the month of May. And I did enjoy it. I think the dry sense of humor was interesting, and it's a bit of a mess, but I can see how people like it. I think it didn't mess with me as much as some other darker books. But again, books where somebody starts out in a dark place and ends up finding hope for the future are way more encouraging than things In a Tailspin spiraling down the whole book. The next book, number 3, was a 5-star read, and I had no lower expectations than that. It was This Story Might Save Your Life by Tiffany Crum. Now, I did listen to the audiobook. With most of these books were audiobooks, but this one specifically I've heard is designed to be listened to as an audiobook. designed to be read as an audiobook, and it truly was. It was great. One of the first books I recommended to my husband to get him hooked on audiobooks was, oh goodness, it's another like mystery podcast because he loves true crime podcasts, and I'll put it in the description. But this book reminded me a lot of that because you have two best friends who are part of a podcast, and then their relationships that were not with each other, but their separate relationships are intertwined kind of in the business, and things are really messy, things are really sus, and things go south. The kind of coincidence of it all, I guess, is the name of their podcast. Actually, what is the name of the podcast? I think it's The Story Might Save Your Life, or Could Save Your Life, something like that. So the name of the book. And it talks about a lot of like near-death situations and how people have escaped them. And that ends up being what this book is about. So it's like one big episode with clips of like different episodes in there. I don't know if that makes sense. Somebody else has probably summarized it better than me, but it was fabulous and I would recommend, and doing the audiobook especially. The next book I read was The Correspondent by Virginia Evans, and holy moly, another one I've heard lots of great things about and another one that did not disappoint. I think that people who are maybe used to high fantasy, high stakes, lots of things going on, this is not an automatic recommendation. I have a friend who reads mostly like high stakes romantasy, and I was like, man, this book was great, but I actually don't know if you would like it because it is just kind of like life from the perspective of an older woman and her facing the things that have happened in her past, as well as her facing the future, and kind of accepting that she is in this like kind of winding down stage of life where she's losing a lot of people and realizing that some of her relationships are not where she would have liked them to be. And you are just reading her correspondence. And so she is the correspondent, and she writes letters to everybody, her favorite authors. She writes letters to her sister-in-law and childhood best friend. She writes letters to a little boy who is not so little by the end of the book. So filming with a toddler in the room was not the move. It's the next day. We're gonna go ahead and pick up right where we left off, as long as I can recall. So I was talking about The Correspondent by Virginia Evans, and I gave this 5 stars, and I loved it. I would say there's probably a lot of the review that like I didn't get to or I already touched on, but this is like really what I want to drive home. If you're a person who appreciates relationships with like other generations, like multi-generational community, I think you would love this. It made me think of my grandmas and just like the sweetness and the perspective of life that you get when you talk to somebody who's been around for a little bit longer. And so I just like felt like recommending this to all of my friends who I know also have close relationships with their grandparents. And so if that's you, I would recommend picking this up. The next book I want to talk about was another like kind of book talk phenomenon, and that is Into the Blue by Emma Brody. I gave this one 4 stars. Now, I'd say the beginning of the book kind of disappointed me, and until I realized I was only like 30% of the way through, was kind of frustrated with how little depth it went into in the formation of, okay, help the names, AJ, I believe, and Noah. As they met as teenagers, they were like rivals, enemies. They're just a little bit standoffish, you know? And we see them like come together through acting classes with his great aunt. Yeah, I think so. Anyways, let me just give the summary real quick. So we've got this girl, AJ, I believe is her name, and she works at a film store. Her like dream is to be a writer for SNL, doing like sketches, and she just like wants to write for the screen. And then she has a new coworker that comes in, and his name is Noah Drew. He's part of the iconic Drew family, a family of actors and just Hollywood people. But he has a reputation in the town for being a bad boy, for going crazy and like burning down his neighbor's garage or something like that. And he's back, nobody knows why, but he's like kind of isolated because of his reputation. And she thinks he's kind of like a stuck-up bad boy, and she's like a quiet nerd, you know? They end up doing some acting work together, and they form a really deep bond and connection through that, and end up also like falling in love a little bit, and come alongside each other in some hardships in their life. And I was like, yeah, okay, I can see this. And then it just never fully like grabbed onto my heart, I would say. And so I was really frustrated in the way that it wasn't like bringing me into the relationship very much. And I could see, like, from the outside, it was like getting the spark notes of somebody's relationship and then hearing they broke up. And you're like, oh, okay. And it like doesn't break your heart like it probably did theirs, because you weren't connected to the relationship in the first place. And that's how I felt in this book. It is like a kind of back and forth throughout the story. You see them come, like, fate, coincidence, the universe brings them together and then tears them apart again. Spoiler alert, sorry. And you are partially like, I don't know. I can see how it would pull on some people's heartstrings. I just feel like I never got fully connected until we really got to the end, and there's like more depth and more honesty. But a lot of the times I was just like, guys, quit being stubborn and just like commit. Like, really, what are you afraid of? I mean, I know what you're afraid of, but at some point you kind of just have to get over it. Sorry. That was my, I hope that's not a spoiler, but that's kind of my original thoughts and feelings. I was crying at the end. The ending like struck a chord with me, and I think it's just a heavier. Yeah, anyways. So I gave it 4 stars overall, but the first half I was really disappointed in like the lack of connection, and then at the very end I was thoroughly connected. So, it was good. The next book I read is a little quick novella. I read it as a little palate cleanser because I have those 3 back-to-back like booktok phenomenons, and I was ready to kind of switch things up. And this is one that I actually just picked up because I'd seen it in my audiobook library and thought it, looked interesting. I don't know, something I hadn't read before. Did I even tell you what it is? It's called Break Room by Miye Lee, and it is a Korean translated work, and it's about a reality show that was created after a documentary about like the villains in the co-working space failed. So they had to go back and like reintroduce this idea in a way that entertained audiences more, aka a reality show. And this person who was originally a fan of the documentary is now called in the reality show, and they don't know that they are called in because their coworkers nominated them as like the worst coworker in the office. Tough situation to be in, but all the contestants there are in the same situation except one, and they have, I think, a week to find out who the mole is, like who here is genuinely a bad coworker and who's just acting and playing the part. So it was interesting. It was not a long book at all, and so I finished it in one afternoon and evening, and I thought it was like, I don't know if any parts were like laugh out loud funny, but it was entertaining. And yeah, it felt like a little bit dystopian and dark, and I don't know if that was just my mood at the time because I was reading it at night, or if there's actually like a little bit of like weird. The narrator is a little, maybe like kind of bit of a creep. Maybe that's like a bad way to put it. I don't know. You just like, is he a reliable narrator? I don't think so. And you kind of like are seeing things through his perspective, and so you're kind of wondering like, why is he noticing certain things and what is he not noticing? Who is he? But I gave it 3 stars overall. I think it was a perfect palate cleanser. Honestly, like I could bump it up to 3.5 just because I think it did what it needed to do, but it wasn't like phenomenal. I just read it to get the like little bookmark in Goodreads where they have the seasonal challenges and you have to read things from different categories. I saw this one in the AAPI authors category and was like, oh, I have that one, and I read it and I enjoyed it. The next book I read was The Escape Game by Marissa Meyer. I gave this one 3 stars as well. It is a YA murder mystery based on it's not based on a true story, but in this story, there is a game show, and I think it's called The Escape Game, and it's like escape rooms solved by teams who come on and love puzzles, and they're like solving the mysteries to get out of the escape rooms. There's different trials and different like advantages you can get over other teams, and it's a elimination process to see who is the ultimate escape room players, I guess. However, this particular show experienced a scandal. At the beginning of the book, you see the previous season ends in one of the contestants being found dead by their sister, who is on a competing team. And the sister is suspected of murder, but nobody can prove it, and so everyone's trying to move on and kind of escape the scandal and just keep their livelihoods. And you get to meet the new team the new team members coming into this next season and see their kind of backstories and their motivations, their reasons for coming. They all love puzzles and have a little bit of found family aspect here. But things are still not as they should be. There are suspicious things going on, and it's looking like someone may end up hurt again, if not. So they're trying to solve the game mysteries as well as some real life mysteries here. And you get to see all the different layers of the characters, and I loved it. I would say the mystery itself, I predicted half of it at the beginning, but the other half I didn't see coming. So it was decent. After this, I started a challenge where my editor picks all of my books. And so for the last 2 months or 2 weeks, goodness, not 2 months, my editor picked all of my books, and she is a fantasy. She's a sucker for beautiful covers, and I love going over and seeing her book collection. And so she helped me pick out some books to read, starting off with The River She Became by Emily Varga. Now, this one is actually not released until, I want to say, the end of June, or like the middle end of June. But I had like the advanced audiobook, and so this one I think she picked because of the cover, and it is gorgeous. And I ended up giving the book 4 stars. It was slow burn perfection. If you are fans of One Dark Window, Two Twisted Crowns, I would say this is a great story. You have a little bit of a mix of like the fairy or the fae and human world, kind of similar to Akatar, and there are also some aspects. What series am I thinking of? I don't know. It's like a little bit of a tie-in from other series, but not quite as much as like I would say Powerless, when you feel like you're just reading the same story in a different font. I love Powerless. It's not slander, but you know what I mean. This one had enough originality to it where I could enjoy it and wonder where things were going. All the books for the rest of the month pretty much will be in a separate vlog, and so you guys can follow along for that reading vlog to get a little bit more in-depth story. I'm just going to give you the quick overview for the sake of this video. The next book I read for that challenge was Seraphina in the Black Cloak, and I gave it 3 stars. It is by Robert Beatty, and it is, I want to say, middle grade, maybe, YA. A story about a young girl, I want to say she's like 11, 12, named Seraphina. She lives in the basement of this rich estate, and this is put back in post-Civil War. I would say like late 1800s, maybe early 1900s. She lives with her papa, who is a mechanic or electrical engineer or something for this estate. And she is kind of like hidden. They live in the basement. The estate owners don't know, but they're homeless, like kind of hidden away from society. And she is a little bit different, but doesn't know what about her is different, I guess. And she one night sees something as she's out doing her rat catching duties, and she finds a little girl who ends up going missing with a man who like basically eats her, and she disappears. I don't know, it's kind of terrifying. I remember texting Allie because she had told me like, oh, it's like a kid's book, like it's an easy read. And sure, like it's not a long book and it's not, but I was expecting like, I think lighthearted, and I didn't take the like tone of the book seriously until this little girl got her soul sucked out of her, basically. And I was like, oh. So little like warning there, content warning. It's still written for kids, so not that crazy unless like you take it that deep, you know? I don't know, but it was entertaining, and I genuinely enjoyed the story, and it was a page turner. So I got through that one in a couple days, and I gave it 3 stars. The next book I read was kind of an in-between. Honestly, it wasn't even for the challenge. I was waiting on other audiobooks and books to become available, and I just needed something to binge, and I got access to the Fury Bound audiobook by Sable Sorensen. If you have heard of the Direbound series, it's kind of like Fourth Wing, but werewolves, basically. Or not werewolves, just dire wolves. I would say some books are like made to fill the holes left by a series that you were waiting on to be finished, and this book was recommended to me as such for my Fourth Wing hangover. Do I think it compares? Probably not. Do I think it's like takes the excess spiciness to the next level? Yeah. I could do without that, but it has enough interesting like plot and stuff like that to keep me reading. So I gave Fury Bound 4 stars. I honestly don't remember what I gave Direbound, but I did enjoy it, and ended up finding out that Allie ordered this book literally like the day after I finished reading it. So I'm kind of just including it in the challenge in hindsight, basically. And yeah, she also has like the most beautiful physical copy of it. So if I could have like held that in my hands as I read the book, that would have been amazing. After that, I started the series by Tracy Wolff, it's the Crave series. Book number 1 is Crave. Book number 2 is Crush. And I have since read book number 3, Covet, but that was not part of this month, so we're going to exclude that from this wrap up. This is like, again, I think it's like a knockoff, not a knockoff in a bad way, just like a new generation's version of Twilight. And I don't even know like how separated, maybe like 10 years separated from Twilight. I remember listening to the first audiobook and I was a little cringed out because they say like, oh, this school is creepy AF. And hearing that like said out loud by an audiobook narrator, just like kind of like, oh, you know, it was like back to my high school days with the high school slang. And it's just like not quite how we talk today. And for some reason, like the fact that it related back to like a time of my life where I was 17, the same age as these characters, when people talk like this, it was too much for me. But it kind of calmed down after the first book, or at least I didn't notice it as much. So in this series, you're following a girl, Grace, and she tragically loses her parents in an accident and has to move from San Diego, California, where she's grown up her whole life, to the middle of nowhere, Alaska, to live with her uncle and her cousin at a boarding school. Now she shows up to this boarding school and things seem pretty weird, and honestly she keeps ending up in dangerous situations and she doesn't know what's going on, and things just keep escalating. And then finally she finds out that there is a lot more going on, and this is not a school of normal children. These are paranormal. Honestly, like they're mostly not even children, I don't think. They're like immortal, and so they're hundreds of years old, but they're basically teenagers, you know? So she doesn't really feel like she fits in here. She has everyone's focus because she's a human in a paranormal school, and also seems to be the target of a lot of hate crimes sort of situation. There ends up being more to it, but she doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't even know who's targeting her. And she also happens to be falling in love with the most popular, most powerful bad boy vampire, Jackson Vega. Need I say more? All right. Then you continue for the rest of the series and you would just find more about the paranormal world, more about her. I can't tell you any more about those individual books following in the series because I feel like it would spoil the first one. So that's where that's at. If you want to hear more about the stories, you can go and check out the reading vlog when that comes out. My editor picks my reads. In between this reading challenge, I completely forgot. I actually finished Pines by Blake Crouch. My husband and I started this audiobook on a road trip maybe back in October, and we made it 80% of the way through and then ran out of Spotify audiobook hours. So we finally finished it on another audiobook another road trip in the month of May. I gave it 3 stars. It's like a heck of a break there to go and not read it for 6 months and then finish it up, but it like sticks with you. It's kind of really creepy, and there was no way I could forget where we were at in the book. So that was not an issue. This book, you are following the story of a man who is a Secret Service agent, ex-military. He was once held hostage in Afghanistan and like tortured to the point of near death. And he is now working for Secret Service, and he's sent to investigate this town because a couple of his coworkers had gone missing there previously. And he shows up, and it is just not right. Like, this seems like sweet small town America. And then the longer he's there, like, things are really weird. And so I can't say anything else on that. Yeah, without spoiling it. So is he in danger? Are all the people in the town in danger? Is there something crazy going on in the world? Yeah, there is. You just have to read it. I can't say more. It is part of a trilogy, I think, and I personally won't be continuing the trilogy, but my husband is really excited to. It just gave me too much of the heebie-jeebies, I think. But this is not my first Blake Crouch book, and I feel like I enjoy them. They are a little bit like higher. They evolve. Oh my gosh, I can't think. They require a little bit more brain power than my go-to like romances and fantasy and literary fiction. It's a like sci-fi thriller type book, so Not my typical genre, but it's good to mix it up every now and then. The last book that I read in the month of May was Crush, the second book in the Crave series, and I already touched on that, so I'm not going to go any more into the details there. Yeah, those are the 13 books I read in the month of May. I hope you guys enjoyed this reading wrap up. I hope maybe you were inspired to read some of these books yourselves. Drop your favorite read from the month of May in the comments, because despite my ever growing, never ending TBR, I love getting new recommendations. So